Hey guys, and welcome to the session. Today I want to discuss how you can use the filter function in Python. Now, one of the most popular videos on the channel so far has been about the reduce function, which is very useful, very popular. And filter, in my view, is often done with reduce. People tend to do map, filter, and reduce and kind of learn them as a free. Well, at least I did anyway. So let's, in this video, kind of go over right from the bare basics. So what does filter actually do? And then I'll take you through a range of different use cases as to what filter can actually do and different ways upon which you can use it in your code. So our first point of call is just talking from a high level as to what filter actually does. First, we need some dummy data. So suppose this is our data. We have a list of strings. We have 1, 2, 3, and an empty one here. So quite often in Python, we want to do the sort of following meta task. We want to say, here's some sequence. I want to go through it and only pick certain items. So say, for example, in this case, we might just want the strings that actually contain characters. So these three here. You might just want files from a directory that have a certain suffix. You might want URLs that have a specific ending. There's loads of times when we need to filter some sequence and only take those items which match a certain filter. And that's basically what filter does. You give it a sequence, you give it some kind of metric, which basically says keep or not keep, and that's it. It gives you the items back. Now, what it does, it returns an iterator, so it's not actually going to process all the items in one go. One of the things I've been asked a few times is, well, why can't you just use a list comprehension? Well, you can, but bear in mind that that's going to process the entire item in one go. You could do a generator comprehension or generator expression or whatever. That sort of does the same thing as filter, but I think just using filter keeps it really nice, simple, and straightforward. Suppose you wanted to get a list back, you could just pass the filter object to the list function. So let's start with this guy here. You can actually call the filter function and pass in none as the function. So normally what you do is you do filter, and then we need to pass in a function. In this case, it's preset to none, followed by some iterable. So let's go ahead and just do, I'm going to call this, let's call it v1. So our version 1. And just for like ease of reading, we'll cast it straight to a list. We're going to say filter, and then we need to pass in a function to determine, okay, how do I filter things? And then pass in the sequence. But if I pass in none right from the offset, and then my sequence's names here, and probably help if we print v1, wouldn't it, so we can see it. Let's see, let's run this, and we get James, Alex, Matthew here. Now, whenever you pass in none, basically what happens is it takes each item's like truthy or boolean value. Now, if you envision what each of these will give, like if I did print the bool of, and let's put this here, and probably spell print correctly as well. We get true because this has a valid, like non-empty value. If we kick out all the characters and say what's the boolean value of an empty string, we get false. Same as like 0, empty list, etc., etc. So remove this, run again, and that's the first way you can do it. Just pass in none. It will immediately filter out all of the things which have a false equivalent. So, if I did 0, empty list as well, yeah, they're not included. Maybe this list now contains 1. There we go. Now this has a boolean value of true. It's a non-empty list, therefore we get it back, which is cool. Let me show you what happened if you didn't do list. So if you just did it like this here, we're going to get back our filter object, which then means, because this is an iterator, we can call next, and we can then compute these on the fly. So there we go. We get James here. Bear with me a second. Let's clear that. So maybe you called this 3 times. We'll yield out 3 items. So there we go. James, Alex. This one's been filtered out, so next one is Matthew here. Now that we've seen what none does, I want to cover 3, in my view, 3 very common use cases. That's using built-in methods here, using a user-defined function, and then finally using a lambda. In my view, these are the 3 ways that I think these are used the most. It's certainly the way that I tend to use them the most. So we'll clear this up, and we'll switch things around, and let's take a look at using some built-in methods as our function here. Now, to use a built-in method, it's actually pretty straightforward. I'm going to keep the same setup, except I've got this in lowercase, and I've got these 2 in title case here. Now, imagine we just wanted the title case names. Let me kind of move this for a second, and let's just try something. Let's do print, and we'll take this one here, and then we'll do .is, let's do is title. So this is going to return true or false depending on if this is in title case. So yeah, we get true. Let's try and move this a to a lowercase one, and we get false. Now what I can do to use it in here is effectively do this, but do str. Now there's one small change you have to make when you're calling this. So remove that, bring back v1 here, and you want to do this, but remove the calling bit here. We're not actually calling the function here. The filter function takes this and then calls it for us. So if we do this, it actually errors out. So just something to be aware of there. And we'll do run, and there we go, Alex and Matthew. So maybe James now appears in title case as well. There we go, all three of them happen. So really quickly, just what's happening, we're looking at each name in this, passing each name in turn to this, and if it returns true when passed into here, we're getting it back on the other side. So it's a really simple, nice, straightforward way of doing it. It's sort of similar to, I know, like, because I've done list at the front here, it's a bit like doing this. Like if I say I did, I don't know, I for I in names, if I dot is title. So with this list setup, this and this are like effectively the same. So if I did n as well here, running that, we actually get the same result both times. It's just that, of course, without list, this is returning an iterator. So actually, it's more similar to doing it like this here with a generator expression. But for most cases, I think filter just looks a bit cleaner. But yeah, it's personal preference. If you find that cleaner or that cleaner, yeah, it's up to you. It's your code, of course. Now then, the next way of doing it is by using a user-defined function. Now, let's suppose, for example, we want to use the same things, but we'll have a bit more of a specific criteria here. So maybe this time we want only names that have two t's inside them. So basically the syntax for this is define a function that takes in one of them and returns true if certain criteria is true, right? So imagine we want, two t's to return true. So we can do def has tt. Bit of a strange criteria, but it's effectively the same. You just choose a function to say true or false at the end, and then all you do is pass in your function inside here. So we will do return, so we need some input. Let's do name, and we will do name dot count of t is equal to 2. Now we can call it and check that it works with a single input. So we'll do print has tt, and let's try it with this name here. Removing that, of course, don't need that any longer. And yeah, that's true. Let's do it with one t there, like that. And false, okay? So yeah, so we know that this works for a single input. And it really is as simple as basically just saying, okay, do this here, like that. Quite nice, right? So remove this. We'll bring back the print for v1. We'll clear the screen. And there we go, nice and simple. I don't know, imagine if James was now spelled like that. Yeah, there we go. So because this returns true when passed through here, that was included. This was passed into the function and didn't return true, but then this was. And you can even see, like, and it's kind of probably invisible, but if we did something like this, let's do a print inside here, we can see that, like, the filter function is going off and calling this. So because I've done a print statement here, we can see Python is doing all the function calls through this, passing in James, Alex, and Matthew. And at the end, we have our nicely filtered list, filtered according to this criteria. And last but not least, and I think this is probably my favorite way of doing it, is doing it with a lambda. Now, I guess doing a user-defined function and a lambda, it really kind of comes down to, well, how complicated is your function? For something like this, which is a pretty straightforward check, I would argue that this is better using a lambda. However, a user-defined function is good for like a really kind of complicated check, something ideally that is more than a single line. And it's pretty straightforward. So if I did v1 underneath here, let's do v2. We'll also print off v2 as well. All you really do is, rather than doing a function like reference, you do your function straight in here. Okay, maybe our function says, let's do n, and maybe we want the first character to be equal to s. So let's do n dot starts with, spell it right, s, like that. Okay, let's try that. Okay, and we get that, which is fine. Let's do that for Matthew as well. So now Matthew returns true. So it's effectively the same, rather than referencing a function, we pass the function straight in and it's fine. This though, I think has a few benefits. Now, generally, I would always try and do this, especially if the function I'm referencing is only being used once for this. In my view, functions are designed to be like reusable. It's a single thing you define once and we use it lots and lots. Having a function that you only use once, to me, just seems a bit wasteful. So try and avoid this unless your function is really complicated, or maybe you're using it in more than one place. So always try and do it as a lambda if you can. So we'll remove this for a second. That's no longer needed. Now let's try and replicate this. If I just do this here and put it like that and change n to name, this is exactly the same thing. So we can clear the screen. We can hit run, and there we go. And as a nice kind of simple one-liner, there's quite a lot going on here. Yeah, you could do it as a list comprehension, but in my view, I think this kind of simple use of filter and lambda is awfully nice. I think it's really kind of simple and functional. So guys, these are my simple ways upon which you can use the filter function. As I've said earlier, this is generally aimed at those who are kind of starting off, not really seen it before. But if you're finding yourself in this situation where you have sequences, maybe you're iterating over them, maybe you're appending to a new list and using that. If you can do this instead, I think it's a lot better. It's a lot cleaner, and it kind of adheres more to that functional style of code. I certainly use these quite a lot on my own code. I think they're nice and clean. And of course, you can use it with none to basically say, give me any items that generally equate to true or have a Boolean value of true. You can use built-in methods, so you can do things like str.isTitle. We can do user-defined functions, so you can reference your own way of filtering something and pass that in. Or as we've just seen, you can use it as a lambda. And guys, if you have any way upon which you've used filter that you think is really interesting or kind of quirky, feel free to share it in the comments, and I'd love to see what you guys have done. Cheers for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next session.